She was standing just feet from death when an avalanche on Dhaulagiri silently swept away the legendary Jeanette Harrison. The German alpinist Margareta Morin miraculously survived that hell, but fate had a much more cynical ending in store for her. How could someone who survived the death zone on an 8,000er end up dying on a slope that the pros call safe? Why did Muzda Ada claim her life where danger was least expected? And why did the mountaineering world bury her twice? This is a story of fatal irony, the kind the mountains never forgive. One wrong step on a glacier is all that separates triumph from eternal silence. Margareta Morin knows this, but she doesn't back down an inch. We're in West Germany, an era that would later be called the Renaissance of mountaineering. While the world below is busy with everyday life, up here, people are learning to breathe the thin air all over again. Margareta enters the demanding world of the Deutscher Alpenverein. The DAV isn't some hobby club. It's a true training ground, forged with iron discipline. There's no room for casual participants, and the hierarchy is stricter than the military's. First, it's all about the rocks. It's the foundation, a step you just can't skip. The foothills become her second home. She wears her fingers raw on the granite, learning to feel the stone, to trust it with her weight. Every crack, every ledge, becomes a letter in her new alphabet of survival. But the rocks are just a prelude. The real test of character awaits in the Western Alps. Ice walls. Here, the rules of the game change in an instant. Solid ground gives way to slippery, unpredictable ice. Margareta spends hours honing her technique until the movements become pure reflex. The cold seeps into her bones, the wind tries to tear her from the face, but she keeps moving. Iconic names start appearing on her resume. Grossglockner, Austria's highest peak. Mont Blanc, the roof of Europe. These aren't just dots on a map, they are harsh examiners. On these slopes, she masters her rope work until it's second nature. Knots are tied blindfolded, belays are set up in seconds. Moving as a rope team becomes intuitive, as if her partner is an extension of herself. It's here, in the battle against the icy wind and her own exhaustion, that Margareta's defining quality is born: complete self-reliance. She's no longer just a follower. She can make the calls where a single mistake is far too costly. These skills, hardwired on the slopes of the Alps, become the foundation for everything she will face in the future. She conquers giants, but her name doesn't flash across the headlines. In a world where mountaineering is rapidly becoming an industry, Margareta remains invisible. Look at her gear. There are no bright sponsor patches, no logos for energy drinks, or brands that pay for every step to the summit. She doesn't belong to the privileged caste of professional athletes whose job is to smile for the camera in front of a flag. Margareta Morin represents a completely different, special archetype: the serious amateur. That might sound trivial, but don't let the term fool you. Behind that name lies an iron will and a life of total sacrifice. While the pros train on the clock, Margareta is living a double life. 5 days a week, she's just another employee, a cog in the machine, simply doing her job. But the moment her shift ends on Friday, a transformation begins. All of her free time, every minute of vacation, every single weekend, it all belongs to the mountains. This isn't a hobby. It's a second job, one she has to pay for out of her own pocket. And the cost is steep. Her money doesn't go towards life's comforts, new furniture, or a fancy car. Every last cent is turned into carabiners, ropes, and a ticket to the base of another mountain range. She denies herself the simple pleasures of city life, all for the chance to feel the chill of a glacier once more. It's a fanatical devotion, one that demands rigid discipline, not just on the mountain, but in her bank account as well. But what's most striking about her story is the deafening silence surrounding her accomplishments. This is an age that demands heroes. Other climbers hire PR agents, do interviews, chase the spotlight. Margareta, however, goes against the grain. Her media presence is almost non-existent. She has no desire to be on a magazine cover or become some kind of role model. Just imagine, someone pulls off these incredibly difficult climbs, risks it all, endures inhuman conditions, and leaves behind not a single written word. She didn't keep a blog, never wrote in a journal meant for publication, didn't pen a memoir, which, for her time, was truly rare. Most people want to document their triumphs, to shout to the world, "I was here." But Margareta says nothing. Later, mountaineering historians would have to piece together her story from scraps, interviewing anyone who happened to cross her path. Her motivation is almost frighteningly pure. It's a philosophy of climbing for the climb itself. She doesn't need applause from an audience down below. The only audience that matters is the mountain itself. She isn't climbing for a line on her resume. She's doing it for that moment when you're utterly alone with eternity. This frees her from public expectation, but it also turns her into a ghost to the outside world. She only truly exists in the here and now, on that vertical rock face. The moment she descends, she vanishes back into the crowd, her secret intact. The mountains were no longer a temple of silence. They were becoming a loud, dangerous marketplace. The late 1990s flipped the script entirely. Suddenly, there was an explosion. High-altitude mountaineering became a commodity, something you could buy if your bank account had enough zeros. The slopes of Everest and the other giants were suddenly dotted with the colorful tents of commercial expeditions. It seemed like anyone with enough cash could now buy a ticket to the top of the world. But the mountain has a way of punishing arrogance. And Margareta understood the difference between writing a check and having real skill. She dives into this new world, but with surgical precision. Margareta sticks to the professional end of the market, avoiding the budget outfits that cut corners on things like oxygen and safety. She goes for the industry's elite, outfitters like Amical Alpin. It's a German logistics machine, reliable, expensive, and flawless. She pays a fortune, but let's be real. She's not buying an all-inclusive climb. She's buying access to the infrastructure. And this is the key detail that so many people miss. On the roster, she's listed as a client, but on the mountain, that title just melts away. Look at her in base camp. While wealthy tourists are demanding hot tea and complaining about the weather, Margareta is checking her gear right alongside the guides. She's not dead weight to be hauled up to the summit on a rope. She's a fully capable member of the team. Imagine the expedition leader's point of view. Usually a client is a headache, a risk factor, a ticking time bomb. But one look at Margareta and the guide can breathe a sigh of relief. She has a proven track record. She knows how to handle herself in the death zone. She knows how to endure, how to make decisions. She pays for the fixed ropes, the supply drops, and the red tape, but she does the work with her own 2 feet and her own lungs. This hybrid approach opens doors for her that are closed to solo climbers. It's her unique survival strategy in the world of big mountains. She doesn't have to grovel before brands, begging for a sponsorship in exchange for a sticker on her helmet. She doesn't need to take pretty pictures for a report. For her, a commercial expedition is just an expensive taxi to the base of the wall. From there, her own experience kicks in, and she climbs as an equal among the pros. This approach allows her to tackle the 8,000ers while remaining a free agent, owing nothing to anyone but the mountain itself. They call it the Turquoise Goddess, the gentlest giant among the harsh, icy titans. The autumn of 1997. The Himalayas greet Margareta with a piercing blue sky and a deceptive calm. Before her stands Cho Oyu, the 6th highest peak on the planet, soaring to 8,201 meters. For many climbers, this is the entry ticket to the big leagues, and Margareta is here to claim hers. The expedition unfolds on a massive scale, using classic siege tactics. This isn't a quick raid, it's a methodical advance. We see a chain of 3 high-altitude camps appear on the slopes, like steps on a giant staircase to the sky. Supplies move up and down. The body acclimatizes to the brutal altitude. On September 26th, the moment of truth arrives. Margareta is standing on the summit. A vast plateau stretches out around her, and in the distance, Everest is visible. But right now, it just seems like a neighbor, not an unattainable dream. But the most crucial part of this achievement is hidden from the casual observer. There's every reason to believe she made this entire ascent without supplemental oxygen. Let's just process what that means. At altitudes above 7,500 meters, in what's known as the zone of extreme survival, the human body begins to slowly shut down. Cells are screaming for energy, the brain starts to lag. But Margareta's body is coping. She's breathing what little the atmosphere has to offer, and she just keeps moving. It's a phenomenal display of physical power and stamina. She's proving something to herself, that her body is built for the heights, that it can keep going where others would simply collapse. But it's right here, on the flat summit of Cho Oyu, that a treacherous psychological trap awaits. The victory feels too clean, too logical. Cho Oyu is a technically straightforward mountain. There are no sheer rock faces that demand expert climbing, no confusing labyrinths to get lost in. It's a grueling but direct slog up snow-covered slopes. Success on a mountain like this plays a cruel trick. It creates a dangerous illusion of invincibility. Her mind locks onto one simple fact. I've been to 8,000 meters and I handled it. But what it erases are the nuances, the perfect weather, the lack of any real technical challenges, and the solid safety net below. Margareta comes back down, completely convinced that now any mountain is within her reach. This triumphant climb isn't just another line on her resume. It's a turning point. It fundamentally changes how she calculates risk. She no longer sees the boundaries of what's possible, believing that altitude is the only real challenge, and everything else is just a minor detail. This experience becomes the trigger, the one that will soon point her toward a goal that forgives no amount of overconfidence, not even the slightest. The White Mountain doesn't forgive mistakes, even if you've stood confidently on the summits of its neighbors. 2 years of quiet training go by. It's the autumn of 1999, and Margareta is making her next move. Her target, Dhaulagiri, 8,167 meters. On paper, the numbers look similar to her last climb, but in reality, this is a leap across an abyss. If Cho Oyu was a wide, snowy highway, Dhaulagiri is a geometric nightmare. The mountain is notorious for its foul temper, and, worst of all, its colossal avalanche risk. There are no gentle, forgiving slopes here. Every single meter you climb is like moving with a target on your back. But this season, nature decides to up the ante. You can see it on the weather maps as they start to fill with alarming colors. The monsoon, which should have left the Himalayas by early autumn, is lingering. This isn't just bad weather, it's a climatic anomaly. Humid winds from the Indian Ocean keep slamming into the icy walls, dumping tons and tons of fresh snow. The mountain slopes are literally groaning under the weight of all this new powder. The snow has no time to compact, no time to transform into fern, that solid, icy base you need for your crampons. It's loose, heavy, and completely unstable. Picture a giant layer cake, where none of the layers are stuck together. The slightest vibration, a single misplaced step, or even just a shift in temperature could be enough to set the whole thing in motion. The veteran guides are looking at the summit with a deep sense of unease, but the expedition machine is already in motion. Margareta joins a formidable international team. This isn't some group of amateur enthusiasts. This is an all-star team, where every member is a seasoned pro who knows exactly what they're worth. And just look at who's climbing alongside her. Her partner is Jeanette Harrison. In the world of mountaineering, that name is legendary. A British woman who had already written herself into the history books, becoming the first woman to summit Kangchenjunga, one of the most ferocious mountains on the planet. Having a star like that on the team has an almost hypnotic effect. On one hand, it's an incredible status boost for Margareta herself. If you're climbing with Harrison, you are elite. But on the other hand, it creates a dangerous psychological trap. When you're surrounded by people of that caliber, your sense of danger gets dulled. You start to think the leader's experience can somehow tame the elements, that the team's professionalism is a magical shield against the falling snow. Margareta, buoyed by her success from 2 years prior and the support of her legendary partner, prepares to set out. She sees a strong team and a clear goal, but perhaps she's overlooking one crucial detail. The mountain has already loaded its slopes. Millions of tons of snow are just waiting for the right moment to come crashing down. And no amount of accolades can change the laws of physics. At 7,400 meters, every single step demands the same effort as running a marathon at sea level. It's the morning of October 24th. The sun is just beginning to kiss the Himalayan peaks. But here at High Camp, things are already stirring. Climbers emerge from their tents, looking like clumsy astronauts in their puffy down suits. The air is so thin that even tying your bootlaces becomes an act of heavy lifting. The team readies themselves to leave. The plan is ambitious, either a final push for the summit, or at the very least, a grueling acclimatization run up to the ridge to feel out the path ahead. Either way, there's only one direction to go, up into the heart of an icy wilderness. The snow under their boots doesn't crunch. It makes a deep, hollow whoomphing sound. This is the exact snow the forecasts warned them about. There's a lot of it. Way too much. After a prolonged monsoon, the slope resembles a giant featherbed, just looking for an excuse to let go. But the team pushes on. We see the line of climbers, slowly etching a path into the mountain's white canvas. They move single file, stepping into the footprints of the person ahead, trying to compact the loose snow and forge some semblance of a path. It's grueling work. With every step, they sink knee-deep, sometimes hip-deep, into the snow. Each movement requires colossal focus. Now, let's focus on the team's formation. Margareta Morin is positioned near the front of the line, right behind Jeanette Harrison. Just picture it. A world-class climbing legend and a serious amateur from Germany, moving almost shoulder to shoulder. This is a moment of peak connection. Margareta is practically on her idol's heels, mirroring her exact path. Being this close to such a seasoned leader has a calming effect. The logic is simple. If Jeanette is going this way, it must be safe. The risk must be worth it. The scene looks deceptively normal. Despite the harsh conditions and the deep snow, there's no panic. The radios are crackling with clear commands. The rhythm of the climb is steady. It's the classic business as usual on an 8,000er. The wind is blasting their faces with ice particles. The cold is making every movement stiff. But for people at this level, this is all just part of the job. They're used to the discomfort. Right now, that habit of pushing through is playing against them, drowning out their survival instinct. On this slope, an invisible drama is unfolding, a drama of pure physics. This group of climbers adds extra weight to a snowpack that's already hanging on by a thread. Gravity is relentlessly pulling millions of tons of ice downwards, while friction is desperately trying to hold it all in place. Unknowingly, the climbers are acting as the trigger. They're treading a fine line, but their eyes are locked on the prize, the gleaming summit ridge. They feel like they're in control of the mountain, that their skill and their gear are a guarantee of safety. But the mountain lives by its own laws, and right now, under their crampons, critical tension is building in the snowpack, ready to release at any moment. On the surface, everything looks fine, but the clock is already ticking. A single muffled crack, and in a split second, their entire world is turned upside down. There's no warning, no rumbling of falling rock, just that one sound, like a giant sheet of wood splintering. The slope that just a moment ago felt like a solid path to the heavens, suddenly, treacherously, comes alive. This isn't the kind of powdery snow you can just brush off your jacket. What's happening is the worst-case scenario for this kind of terrain, a slab avalanche. Imagine standing on a tilted pane of glass, and in an instant, someone kicks the support out from under you. A massive slab of wind-packed snow, weighing tens of tons, instantly loses its grip on the layer beneath. It doesn't just crumble, it breaks away all at once, a single, monolithic plate. And caught in the epicenter of this white chaos is Jeanette Harrison. The physics of it are brutal and simple. The slab fractures right beneath the team's feet, and the legendary British climber has absolutely no chance to react. The solid ground beneath her simply vanishes. Instantly, she's swept up and carried away, accelerating at a terrifying speed. This isn't a fall. It's like being trapped inside a freight train made of snow and ice. The mountain doesn't care about your reputation or your achievements. It simply does its work, taking whoever is standing on the fault line. For Margareta, this moment stretches into an agonizing eternity. She's only a few meters from her partner, but on a mountain, distance isn't measured in meters. It's measured in destiny. The fracture line, that razor's edge separating life from death, runs just inches from her boots, just slightly below her position. Margareta freezes, driving her ice axe into the slope, a witness to the terrifying geometry of chance. She watches as a white curtain swallows the person she was just sharing this journey with. She is left standing on the part of the slope that didn't break away. It's a lottery, pure, random, and completely undeserved. If she'd taken just 2 more steps to the left, or a little further down, she would be in that churning chaos with her. But instead, she's left standing on the edge of an abyss, stunned not by the noise, but by the sudden, deafening silence that follows. The avalanche thunders down the mountain, leaving nothing behind but a cloud of snow dust hanging in the air. As the white mist settles, the slope is empty. Jeanette Harrison is gone. one of the world's greatest female climbers, gone in an instant. Her body is left behind in the icy embrace of Dhaulagiri, becoming a part of that unforgiving mountain forever. For Margareta, this moment is a point of no return. She's standing in the middle of this icy wasteland, physically unharmed, but witnessing the tragedy has seared something inside her, something that can never be fixed. The mountain had flexed its power, taking the master and leaving the amateur to carry that burden. And the silence after the avalanche, it's louder than any scream. Margareta is standing on the edge of a void. Just a moment ago, there was a person right here, a partner, a living legend. Now, there's only a white, indifferent blanket of snow and a deafening silence. That moment, that single second, forever splits Margareta's life in two, before and after. In the world of mountaineering, there's an unwritten rule. You're responsible for your partner, but how can you be responsible for a force of nature that plays Russian roulette with human lives? Slowly, like a poison, the most destructive feeling seeps into her mind: survivor's guilt. Her brain frantically rewinds the tape, trying to find a mistake that wasn't there. Why her, and not me? Why did the crevasse split the ice just a yard from my feet, and not right under them? These questions cut deeper than any icy wind. Logic is useless here. It's that irrational, clinging guilt that tries to convince you that you've stolen someone else's life, just by being the one left standing. But the mountain doesn't give you time to reflect. Margareta has to get down, and that descent becomes a living hell. Just imagine her condition: shock, the adrenaline crash, and being utterly alone at 7,400 meters. Going down is always harder than going up. But to go down alone, on the very slope that just killed your partner, that's a task beyond the limits of human endurance. Every movement becomes a fight against panic. The slope is still unstable. The snow underfoot feels like a traitor, ready to give way again at any second. Normally, your partner would be there to belay you, to check your footing, to just say something, anything, to keep you going. Now, Margareta hears only her own heavy breathing and the crunch of her crampons. The risk of a fatal mistake multiplies with every step. One wrong move, one knot tied poorly by trembling hands, one moment of panic, and she'll be here forever. And this is where we see her inner steel kick in. She forces her emotions into the deepest corner of her mind. All that's left is cold, hard calculation. Clip in the carabiner, check the gate, weight the rope, step down, repeat. She becomes a survival machine. Her body goes through the motions, drilled into her over years of practice, while her mind fights to keep from plunging into an abyss of despair. When she finally stumbles into base camp, people look at her as if they've seen a ghost. She brings the terrible news, but the very fact that she's standing there at all is a phenomenon in itself. To come back alive from an ordeal like that, with your mind and body still intact, not even every professional could do it. That descent proves that Margareta Morin has more than just physical strength. She has a colossal, almost frightening mental fortitude. She managed to climb out of the death zone, carrying the invisible yet crushing weight of her loss. The headlines are all screaming tragedy, but they're completely blind to the person who's still alive. The entire climbing world is in mourning. News feeds, TV channels, sports magazines. They're all focused on one story: the death of Jeanette Harrison. Her death becomes the only story, overshadowing everything else. Editors are demanding details. Obituaries are hitting the front pages. Jeanette is a star, an icon. Her passing is a huge loss for the entire community. But what about Margareta? In this whirlwind of emotion, she becomes invisible. In the dry police reports and news coverage, she's just a footnote, mentioned in passing with a faceless description: the German climber. And here we see this incredible paradox. A woman has just survived hell, made it down from 8,000 meters after her partner's death. But to the media machine, she's just an extra in the drama of a legendary climber. The journalists are hunting for a story, but they're only interested in the fallen legend. No one is looking for Margareta. Her name is misspelled or just left out completely. To the press, she's just a witness, a plot device who has served her purpose and can now fade away. And Margareta accepts it. In fact, she uses this indifference as a shield. I mean, imagine how easy it would be to give in to that temptation, to step up to the microphones, tell her side of the story, become a talk show sensation, write a book titled I Saw a Legend Die. It's a path many would take, but Margareta does the opposite. She steps back into the shadows. She shuts the door firmly behind her. No interviews, no comments. She goes back to her office, sits down at her desk, and continues her life as an ordinary clerk, as if nothing ever happened. But this silence comes at a cost. The story loses her voice. We know the facts, but we're robbed of the inner perspective. No one is there to record what it feels like to stand on the edge of that avalanche path. That experience remains locked away, sealed inside her. Because she makes no public statements, a strange vacuum begins to form around her name. On the burgeoning internet, in the first climbing forums and online databases, confusion starts to set in. Information gets distorted. People reading the scant reports draw their own conclusions. The thinking goes, if there were no interviews and no news about her coming home, then the tragedy must have been a double one. A persistent myth begins to circulate, that Margareta Morin was also left behind on the slopes of Dhaulagiri. In some records, her name is entered into the column for the deceased, or at least marked with a question mark. She becomes a ghost in her own lifetime. While she's going to work and paying her bills in Germany, the digital world and the climbing grapevine are slowly burying her alive. It's a unique situation. She survived physically, but in the public eye, she simply vanished into that same cloud of snow right alongside Jeanette. Ghosts don't wear crampons or check their gear. But Margareta Morin is very much alive. While the forums and databases list her as dead, she's out there, breathing freely. 5 years of silence go by. The world changes in that time, but her routine stays the same. Work, training, the mountains. The trauma of 1999, that invisible psychological wound left by the avalanche, it doesn't paralyze her will. In fact, it seems to only make it stronger. By 2004, she's past the 50-year milestone. For most athletes, that's the time to hang up the ice axe and write memoirs by the fire. But Margareta isn't most people. We're looking at a woman in the kind of shape that's the envy of people 20 years her junior. Her discipline is almost monastic. She is completely uncompromisingly autonomous. She doesn't need partners to feel secure. She doesn't need anyone's approval or support. For her, the mountains aren't a stadium. They're the only place where life really has flavor. And so, after a break, she sets her sights on a new goal. Margareta's gaze turns eastward, toward the Kunlun Mountains of China. On the horizon, Muztagh Ata, 7,546 meters. This giant is often called the father of ice mountains. But in the climbing world, this peak has another, far more dangerous reputation. It's known for being technically easy. Look at a photo. It's not a razor-sharp peak, but a huge, gently sloping dome covered in snow. Skiers often come here to make a descent from that incredible altitude. There are no sheer walls where you have to hang by your fingertips. It looks like nothing more than a long, hard walk to the top. And right there lies the fatal trap of perception. Margareta, forged in the harsh school of the Alps and a survivor of the hell that is Dhaulagiri, sees Muztagh Ata as a safe option. It's the classic mistake of a seasoned pro, underestimating an opponent that looks tame. Her logic whispers, if I could handle an avalanche-prone 8,000er, this mountain is just a warm-up. She sees Muztagh Ata as a chance to get back to high altitude without the insane risk, a way to reclaim her status in the high-altitude world, but on easier terms. But a mountain isn't a workout machine with an adjustable difficulty setting. The term safe mountain is an oxymoron, something cooked up by marketing teams. At 7.5 kilometers, the thin air kills just as efficiently, no matter how gentle the slope. And the weather here can change faster than you have time to feel afraid. Margareta is betting on her colossal experience and the route's technical simplicity. But that calculation completely overlooks the variables you can't control. And this decision, to take on the easy mountain, becomes the turning point, the moment when overconfidence silences the instinct for caution. 50 is an age for growing roses, not for taking a stroll in the death zone. Spring 2004. China greets the expedition with dry winds and dust, but Margareta's eyes are fixed upward on the glittering dome of Muztagh Ata. She's back in the game, and once again, she's betting on proven professionals. She is supposedly part of a group with Amical Alpen, That company is like a high-end German car. You're paying for comfort and safety, so you don't have to think about how the engine works. Margareta falls into her usual place in the line, silent, focused, a woman who knows the rules of this game better than many of the guides. But let's take a look inside her backpack, because that's where her real strategy is hiding. Margareta understands one thing: you can't cheat time. She doesn't have the same raw strength she had in her 30s, and her muscles take longer to bounce back. So, she compensates with her brain and her wallet. What we see is a true obsession with gear weight. She strips away everything non-essential, literally cutting the tags off her clothes, choosing the lightest carabiners, titanium cookware, the most advanced fabrics. It's the simple math of survival. Every gram she saves down here translates to precious kilojoules of energy saved up there. While the younger, stronger members of the team are hauling extra pounds of bravado, Margareta travels light. Her experience allows her to assemble the perfect kit, where every single item has a purpose. She's buying herself endurance with technology, turning the disadvantages of age into a tactical triumph. The acclimatization process is going by the book, but it's slow. Her body, which has been to 8,000 meters before, is remembering how to adapt, but it's a reluctant process. The group moves upward like a single organism, making shuttle runs between camps. It's a routine: climb up, drop a load, descend to rest. There are no heroics here, just the heavy, monotonous work of the lungs and heart. Finally, they push past Camp 2 at 6,200 meters. The landscape here changes dramatically. The earthly colors fade away, leaving only the sterile white of the snow and a deep dark blue, almost cosmic sky. The group begins the push to Camp 3. Here, the slope of Muzdag Ata is deceptively gentle. It's a giant snowfield that seems to stretch on forever. Crossing it feels like walking on a treadmill that never, ever ends. On the surface, everything looks perfect. The weather is pristine, snow crunches under their crampons. The rhythm of their breathing is steady. Margareta feels confident. Her strategy is paying off. The lightweight gear allows her to keep pace with the group, not missing a beat. She's in her element, controlling every breath, every step. It feels as though the mountain has accepted the rules of the game and is graciously allowing them to pass higher to the next altitude marker, where the air gets even thinner and the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. But this time, the enemy isn't attacking from the outside. It's coming from within her own chest. The period between May 24th and 26th becomes Margareta's point of no return. Just a couple of days earlier, she felt like part of a strong, capable team. But now, that machine is starting to break down. It doesn't happen in an instant. This isn't the sudden, violent blow she witnessed on Dhaulagiri, where the mountain snatches a life in a split second. Here, a different, agonizingly slow scenario is unfolding. We're watching an experienced mountaineer begin to fade, like a candle being snuffed out. The symptoms build like an avalanche, but this is a physiological avalanche. Her breathing becomes heavy, labored, a gurgling sound, as if her lungs are filling with fluid. Every breath is a monumental effort, yet it brings no relief. Specialists call this high-altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE. Imagine the sensation of drowning while on dry land, in a tent in the middle of an icy wasteland. Your body is literally drowning in its own plasma, which seeps into the air sacs of your lungs because of the massive change in pressure. At this point, Margareta's age is no longer just a number. It's a verdict. 50 years brings a lifetime of experience, but it also means the body's resources are wearing thin. It's possible that here, at this critical altitude, some hidden flaw is finally triggered, a heart condition that might only feel like a slight shortness of breath on a jog back at sea level. Up here, it becomes a catastrophe. Hypoxia rips away all pretenses. It finds the body's weakest link and attacks it with ruthless precision. Her heart simply can't handle pumping blood that's grown thick from dehydration. The location only makes things worse. They're at an altitude of 7,500 meters. There's a brutal truth in high-altitude mountaineering. At this elevation, the body can't heal itself. Up here, the body doesn't recover. It only burns through its reserves. Any illness, even a common cold, progresses 10 times faster. And when your lungs or heart start to fail, you're counting time in hours, not days. Margareta is lying in her tent, and the phenomenal willpower that has saved her so many times before is now useless against the raw facts of biochemistry. She knows exactly what's happening. She can see the alarm in the guide's eyes, feel the strength draining from her muscles, her body becoming a dead weight. That's the most terrifying part of high-altitude climbing, the realization that you're trapped inside your own body. There's no pill, no injection that can just reboot the system. The only cure is to get down, immediately, back to where the air is thick with oxygen. But that's the cruel paradox of the death zone. The very illness that's killing you is also robbing you of the strength you need to escape. Margareta is now a prisoner of the very altitude she was so determined to conquer. The mountain, which had seemed so safe, so technically straightforward, has snapped its trap shut, leaving no chance for a miracle. Up here, simple arithmetic is deadlier than any frost or wind. They're trapped somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 meters. It's the gray zone, an altitude where rescue is theoretically possible, but in practice, next to impossible. This is where you run into the brutal logistics of high-altitude rescue, the part they don't mention in the glossy brochures. To get someone who can't walk on their own, an incapacitated climber, down from this altitude, you don't need 2 or 3 people. You need a coordinated team of 6, preferably 8, elite, world-class professionals. They have to be fresh, fully acclimatized athletes, working like a single machine, swapping out every 100 meters. Now, look at the people with Margareta. This is a commercial expedition. She's surrounded by exhausted clients who are fighting for their own survival with every single step, and just a handful of guides. They simply don't have the manpower. Right now, every single person here is focused on one thing and one thing only, putting one foot in front of the other. To haul the weight of a fully grown adult in winter gear, plus oxygen tanks, plus ropes. That's a job for a special forces unit. And there isn't one up here. We're watching the situation fall into a logistical trap. The group is powerless against the simple physics of the problem. They have the will to help, but they lack the sheer horsepower to haul a person through deep snow. And all the while, the clock is ticking against them with terrifying speed. If Margareta develops a case of flash edema, we're not talking days, we're talking hours. In medical terms, it's called a cascading failure of vital signs. Her lungs are filling with fluid faster than the team can even organize a descent of 100 meters. It's a race you can't win on foot. And to make matters worse, it's the time of day. Night on the mountain is a red light for any kind of activity. Temperatures plummet and visibility disappears. Trying to organize a complex technical evacuation in the dark, on a slope with no fixed ropes or a prepared route. It's a suicide mission for the rescuers. The risk of losing more people from the team simply outweighs the chance of saving the one in trouble. The guides are forced to make impossible decisions in that frozen hell, and we, sitting here in our warm homes, have no right to judge them. So often in these stories, people are desperate to find someone to blame, to point a finger and cry negligence. But let's be honest. Without the official case files, without detailed reports and witness testimonies, blaming the guides from Amical, or any company for that matter, is pure speculation. They operate by the book, but the book is written for perfect scenarios. Here, on the slopes of Muztagh Ata, the mountain makes the rules. The guides do everything they can, using the meager resources of their med kit and oxygen bottles, but they aren't miracle workers. They can't teleport someone down the mountain or stop hypoxia with the power of their minds. At this specific point in space and time, her rescue becomes an impossible equation, one that simply can't be solved no matter how desperately they try. Just one missed heartbeat turns a training ground into a frozen tomb. The date is May 26th, 2004. The sun rises over the Kunlun mountain range, lighting up the vast, snowy landscape. But for Margareta Morin, this will be her final dawn. The story of her climbs, one filled with both triumph and tragedy, comes to an abrupt end here, inside a tent, in the middle of a vast white wilderness. We are witnessing a quiet but terrifying end. There's no dramatic fall into a chasm, no snapping rope, no thunder of an avalanche. The mountain claims her life without a sound, as if simply turning off a switch. This moment is striking in its cruel irony. Just think about the context for a second. A seasoned climber, trained in the Alps, a survivor of the death zone in the Himalayas, dies on a mountain that the professional community almost scornfully calls easy. Muzda Ata is considered practically a ski resort for high-altitude climbers. People come here to set records, to get stunning photos, to bag their first 7,000er. Nobody comes here expecting to die. The place feels almost sterile, safe, like a manicured city park. But it's this so-called safe mountain that commits the ultimate betrayal. It lulls you into a false sense of security with its gentle slopes, and then it strikes a blow you can never see coming. Margareta dies in a spot where hundreds of others pass by, often without even bothering to take out their ice axe. And this fact shatters one of the core myths of mountaineering, the idea that the technical difficulty of a route is what defines its danger. You see, a so-called easy 7,000-meter peak can be a far more insidious killer than any vertical cliff. It doesn't intimidate you visually, it just slowly suffocates you, all while you think you've got everything under control. And what's truly tragic here is how powerless experience becomes. Think back to 1999. Margareta was on the slopes of Dhaulagiri when an avalanche swept away the legendary Jeanette Harrison. She survived an absolute hell, where the odds were next to nothing. You'd think a fate like that would grant you some kind of immunity and invisible armor, but biology has no mercy. It doesn't care about your past achievements. Surviving an avalanche does absolutely nothing to help your cells absorb oxygen. Hypoxia is an enemy you can't negotiate with. You can't just show it your climbing resume. It doesn't care how many summits you've bagged or how perfectly you can tie your knots. Margareta's body, worn down by years of struggle and stress, simply gave in to the physics of high altitude. What avalanches and storms on 8,000-meter peaks couldn't accomplish, the silent, creeping lack of oxygen on a safe route did. Her journey ends not at the height of glory, but in the silence of a high-altitude camp. It's a stark reminder that in the Great Ranges, safety is just a dangerous illusion, one that sometimes costs the ultimate price. They say a person can die twice, first when their heart stops, and second when they are forgotten. For Margareta, that second death came terrifyingly fast. Her death on the slopes of Muztagh Ata fell into a complete information black hole. For the global media, this just wasn't a prestigious peak. There was no race between nations, no drama involving Hollywood stars or tech billionaires. To the news agencies, a death on an easy 7,000er is just a statistical anomaly, not even worth the airtime. Unlike the massive headlines of 1999, this time, the airwaves were silent. No one was scrambling helicopters full of journalists. No one was writing poignant articles about her final climb. The only place the truth was recorded was in the niche, almost academic journals of the German Alpine Club, the DAV. Somewhere in the back pages, tucked between reports on membership dues and lecture schedules, a few dry lines of an obituary appeared, but only a handful of people ever read those journals. So, for the wider public, Margareta was frozen in time. In the collective memory, she was forever sealed as the woman who survived in 1999. And then, a strange thing happens, a bizarre distortion of reality. We see how the digital age, an era meant to preserve facts, actually begins to mangle them. In the databases that were just starting to be digitized in the mid-2000s, absolute chaos took hold. The reason was mundane, almost bureaucratic: poor reporting out of China. Records were lost, translations were botched, dates got mixed up. The internet abhors a vacuum, and it began to fill in the blanks with assumptions. Many reputable websites and climbing portals made a mistake, one that they would then copy from each other for years to come. They essentially buried Margareta alive, listing her date of death as 1999. The algorithmic logic was simple and cynical. She was there when Harrison died, and then she disappeared from the headlines. So she must have died there too. And just like that, a mistake becomes fact. People read these lists, and they believe them, completely unaware of the terrible injustice at play. But let's look at the verified timeline. This is absolutely crucial. Margareta Morin survived that tragedy by exactly 5 years. And 5 years? That's a huge amount of time. That's nearly 2,000 days of waking up, going to work, planning a vacation, training, and maybe even smiling. It's an entire life that a sloppy version of history just erases. She exists in two realities. In one, she's a living person, struggling with the trauma of her past. In the other, a ghost, long since written off. And so, in most sources, her name appears as little more than a shadow, a footnote in the stories of more famous, more media-friendly climbers. She doesn't just lose her life, she loses the right to her own story, one separate from the tragedies of others. Millions of footprints in the snow vanish without a trace, unless they're lit by the flash of a camera. Margarita Morin's story isn't just about a single climb. It's a reflection of an entire generation's fate. What we're seeing here is a perfect example of a second-tier athlete. The term might sound clinical, almost dismissive, but it represents a vast community of people. These are the highly skilled amateurs, the shadow athletes, who are, in reality, the very backbone of the entire commercial climbing industry. They have skills that would make many professional guides jealous. Their endurance forged over years of training, but their names never end up in the history books. They remain in the background, the supporting cast for the star soloists whose smiles we see on magazine covers. Just look at the foundation of her life. It wasn't built on a desire for fame, but on pure, honest, hard work. Margareta wasn't looking for sponsors. She wasn't selling her image. She wasn't creating catchy slogans. She just worked a 9-to-5 office job to save up for a ticket to the world of eternal ice. This is passion in its purest form, with no trace of vanity. She climbed because she had to, not because she wanted an audience watching from below. But the end of her story is laced with a cruel, piercing irony you just can't ignore. It's as if fate itself has a dark sense of humor. The woman who survived the hell of Dhaulagiri, who survived an avalanche that killed a legend, and descended from 8,000 meters all alone, finds her end in the one place she'd least expect, a safe mountain, a technically easy 7,000er. It feels like a cruel joke played by the elements. Mustar Ata, what should have been a straightforward climb, a consolation prize. Instead, it claims her life. And this is where the great myth of fairness in the mountains completely falls apart. Margareta was the epitome of discipline. She did everything by the book. She chose the right gear, stuck to her acclimatization schedule, never took a needless risk. She was the model student of mountaineering, and yet, the mountains took her anyway, prepared, experienced, and cautious. It's a stark reminder that up there are no guarantees. You can follow every rule in the book and still lose to your own body, or to sheer bad luck. So, today we're doing what the news reports from the early 2000s failed to do. We're piecing together her journey, not for sensationalism, but for the truth. We are correcting a mistake in the records, freeing her name from the shadow of Jeanette Harrison. We are giving her back the 5 years of life that were stolen by poor reporting and human indifference. Margarita Morin is now taking her rightful, separate place in the history of mountaineering, not as a witness to someone else's tragedy, not as some nameless German participant, but as the strong, autonomous woman she was, a woman who lived for the mountains and remained in them forever, following her own quiet yet profound path.